Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode of New Album Spotlight, the show where I put the spotlight on a new album in progressive rock or related genres that I think you might enjoy, and I'm trying to make it more of a discussion topic, talking about some interesting things that I'm thinking about in the world of progressive rock, and I hope it's a fun time to just sit back and enjoy me talking about new music and what I love about what's coming out in the genre. Because my goal for the channel is always to showcase that the genre is not dead, that there's still a thriving music scene if you dig a little bit deeper and look into the underground layers instead of the surface level mainstream music world. And there's some real gems that I want to highlight and talk about. So today's topic, what I'm talking about is Royal Sorrow and their new album Innerdeeps. This is a new band. This is their debut record. This is a Finnish band that recently signed to Inside Out Music, so that's a pretty big deal for a new progressive band to be able to be signed to Inside Out, which is one of the premier progressive rock record labels at the moment. And I think this showcases a new direction of sorts that Inside Out seems to be heading in, where in the past they've tended to lean towards more legacy prog acts like your Yes and your Jethro Tull and things like that, and more of the early third wave prog, perhaps like Spock's Beard, Flower Kings. But recently it seems like they're signing a lot of new young bands, a lot of new young talent, which I think is very smart of them to be looking forward into the future of the genre and trying to bring young new talent to the forefront to keep the genre alive and happy. And I'm always really excited when a brand new young band comes to the forefront and is playing really exciting, intricate, adventurous music that can be put under the umbrella of progressive rock. Of course, at this point, prog is kind of becoming this all-encompassing genre of just experimental, more adventurous music that's outside of the mainstream rock that you might hear on radio or whatever. So I really love this band. I think they've crafted something really exciting and interesting, and that's really the topic of today that I'm framing this review around, is just what the new bands that are bringing the genre forward, that are infusing new energy and using new influences and elements to elevate their music, which is really exciting for me as a music fan. And I think what's really exciting about this in particular is, in some ways, I feel like it's taking cues and influences from the early 2000s alternative rock and metal scenes and updating it with some new progressive elements to make it a bit more fresh and exciting. So it really works its way into my heart because it reminds me of that great music that I was discovering when I was a teenager. Just to date me a little bit, I was a teenager in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I loved alternative rock and alternative metal and things. I loved Tool and Incubus and these bands that really made a name for themselves in that era, that are the bands that really sparked my interest into progressive rock. It was the foundation laid by some of the more creative alternative bands of the time, plus my dad showing me progressive rock of the 70s, and my exploration from that point forward was to try to find the cross-section between the classic adventurous progressive rock sound and a more modern style like the alternative bands that I was really into at that time. And, I found some that really scratched that itch at the time period. Spock's Beard, Dream Theater, Flower Kings, Pain of Salvation, a lot of metal and prog bands that were adventurous and exciting and taking the genre forward. And I feel like Royal Sorrow is kind of this new fourth wave of progressive rock that's taking its cues from some of those bands from the 2000s and modernizing it in a way that's new and fresh. And I think there's a lot of bands signed recently to Inside Out that are doing the same kind of thing. You had Sometime in February, you had Benthos, you also had Asymmetric Universe coming out recently. These are bands that are young, taking cues from music in the not too distant past and bringing it forward in a really exciting, fun way. And this record brings that kind of alternative metal rock of the early 2000s and adds some glitchy electronica, some pop hooks, and brings some progressive elements that make it really exciting and fun. And every track has something really ear-grabbing, have these really hooky melodies that grab you and make you want to keep listening. but it doesn't just bore you with very conventional song structures and 4/4 time signatures. They do things a bit differently to marry these two things together perfectly that I love. The catchiness and great melodic choices with the adventurous and experimental nature of progressive music. Crafting a really fun listen through 10 tracks. Reminds me a bit too of like modern sounding Leprous, perhaps, is a great reference point. Also a recent band that I have really liked, their latest release, King Crow, are another band that I really think about when I listen to this, who keep that catchy, hooky sensibility, but add a fun progressive element to it to make it beyond just kind of your standard garden variety melodic rock music. So we've got Marcus Hintonen on vocals and guitars, Eero Maijala on bass, Jani Maiskinen on drums. A fantastic trio of musicians who bring this music to life. Some of the highlights for me, I love Metrograve. Glitchy electronica leads to some cool guitar riffing and even some epic bass drops. Once again, brings that kind of modern progressive metal flair with a lot of fun to be had in the catchiness. Release Your Shadow has a great groove to it, some fun hooky vocals and great guitar licks, leading to this really epic, big anthemic chorus. Evergreen has a great sound to it, one of the best examples of how they do this catchy rock really well, with some great musicianship and some great hooks to grab you in. Bloodflower is an interesting one. It starts off as kind of your standard catchy rock track, but then quiets down in the middle and adds some jazzy undertones and a very tasteful guitar solo, which adds an extra interesting flavor to the record. Looking Glass has a lovely melody to it, more of a ballad feel, one of the greatest vocal deliveries on the record, some haunting piano, some electronica style drums on that one. And to me, the pièce de résistance that really brings it all together is the final track, the title track, in fact, which starts off with some bright and melodic sound with excellent bass grooves, some great acoustic guitar, and great catchy melodies in the vocals, and just sounds really pristine. I love the sound and production on the entire record, and the musicianship here is really tight. They play so well together. The bass, the drums, it's a tight rhythm section with some excellent guitar work and some great glitchy kind of keyboardy things hovering around, and a great vocal performance that blends well this very melodic, beautiful sounding tone to some more gruff and grit at the times when it's needed during the record. There's a few lighter moments of like heavier, growling, intense vocals, but it's very far and few between and doesn't detract at all from the melodic nature of the music. And I just love the culmination of all of this music at that end track that builds in this epic musical finale that is very well earned and just creates a really fun, exciting listen through that's pretty brief. But every track has something that grabs your attention and makes you excited to keep hearing and listening to more. And if this is what's on board for the fourth wave of progressive rock and metal, I'm really excited for it. I think this showcases a keen sensibility of great melodic feel that I really enjoy. This is right in my wheelhouse of what I like. I don't like things that are too avant-garde and weird and strange, but I don't like things that are just boring and mundane and just like your standard pop and rock songs that are like 3 to 4 minutes long, have the same structure, the same, time signature, and the same sound, same chords. So this is great how they're able to still make it melodic and catchy and fun to listen to, but add enough of that variety and interest and adventurousness to make it rise above the pack in a fascinating way. So I really love this record, and I think it's supremely solid, and I think even more so it showcases that this band has a bright future ahead of them. It was released in an interesting way where the majority of this album was released through singles. Before the album even came out, there was about 7 singles from the record, I think, which is insane when there's only 10 tracks total. I think it makes sense for a debut record. They're really trying to get their name out there. They're really trying to get ears on their music, and releasing a ton of singles and hoping they catch the attention somewhere makes some sense. But I'm hoping for their next record, they don't just let it all out of the bag right off the bat during the press time, and they save some of the tracks for the album experience. But just a minor nitpick, and of course, if you don't like the singles, you just don't have to listen to them. Even though I feel like doing this channel means I kind of have to talk about and listen to these singles to do them justice on my New Music Weekly episodes. But regardless, it was fun to re-listen to all these tracks within the album format and see how they all connect and fit in the sequence of the record. And I think they fit really well and made for a really fun and fascinating listen that I enjoyed from start to finish. So highly recommend it if you like a lot of the modern prog metal stuff that comes out with a more melodic tinge, if you like modern sounding Leprous, if you like the latest King Crow record, which was called Hopium, by the way. There's a lot of other groups that kind of fit this mold that I've really been enjoying lately, and I think this fits right in line and showcases some vibrancy and youth into the genre, and hopefully they continue to develop and create really fun, catchy, but adventurous music. That's my hope, at least. So thank you guys for joining me for this review. Hopefully you appreciated it, and hopefully you'll go out and check out the record. It should be out now on streaming services, out to purchase by your prog vendor of choice, and it should be a fun one to check out if you're so inclined and if you like this sort of a style. So thank you guys, and I'll hopefully catch you guys in a future episode. Bye everybody, enjoy the music.